Hey everyone, good morning from Bellevue, Washington. Thank you so much for tuning in for today's virtual meetup, a fireside chat with Joel Witten, Head of Data at Rec Room. My name is Sid, and I'm a product marketing manager at Statsig, and I'm super excited to host this session with our guest Joel, who's the head of data at Rec Room, one of the most exciting gaming companies out there. And I'll have him introduce himself in just a minute. And as people trickle in, I just want to get a couple of quick housekeeping items out of the way. The first is that we have some prepared questions for our guest that we'll ask over the next 30 to 35 minutes. And I want to leave maybe 5 to 10 minutes at the very end to take a few questions from our audience. So keep your questions coming in either using the Q&A option or the live chat as you see fit. And, around the 30 or 35-minute mark, we'll take a pause and, take some of these questions that are coming in. The second is that we will be recording the session. So we'll send you the video in a couple of days. So feel free to, evangelize this internally within your organizations as well. Without further ado, let's get started with our fireside chat. And, I was especially excited about this one because Joel has been scaling experimentation and building a data-driven culture at Rec Room over the last couple of years, going from near zero to 150 experiments per year. So I know we're going to have some awesome anecdotes, examples, and stories, great takeaways, hopefully, that we can all, implement in our own organizations. So to get things started, Joel, can you tell us a bit about Rec Room and your current role there, and maybe even touch upon some of your previous experiences as well?
Sure. Cool. Yeah, nice to see everybody, and thanks, Sid. Maybe I'll start off with what is Rec Room. For those of you who don't know, Rec Room is this online gaming platform that lets you play some of the millions of games that are on the platform, along with the millions and millions of players that are also on the platform. And so you come in, typically it works, you come in, you build your own your avatar, so that it's like your representation, the representation of yourself online, and then you go and explore Rec Room and go and play those games and meet people, etc. There's a couple differences between us and other platforms that we really pride ourselves on. First is that we work hard to be on almost every platform. So it's, I think, 10 platforms and counting. So like wherever your friends are, like we want to be there. So we want people to connect with each other on mobile or on VR, PlayStation, Xbox, etc. Rec Room is also kind of opinionated about the Rec Room world. There's like everybody logs in and you've got your own dorm room that you can customize. You can meet people in the rec center. There's this aesthetic around Rec Room, there are levels, etc. And we're also kind of creation first. Anybody within a Rec Room can build a game. So you go and you log in, you pull out your this tool called the Maker Pen, you go and just build a game in a Rec Room. So as kind of some of the themes throughout here will be really around the player experience and seeing and engaging with the games that are on the platform, but then also the creator experience of building the games and then wanting to get people to go and play your games and monetizing, etc. So that'll kind of be like a theme throughout some of these experiments about these kind of two-sided marketplace that we think about. And my role here is I head up the data team here, the data team, which consists of the analytics engineers who own and improve upon our warehouse, the product data scientists who think about experimentation, driving product strategy, and we're building out the ML team that thinks about personalization across various parts of the app. Before this, I was at Facebook within Meta, working on news, what news should people be consuming, and what are the news products we should build. Dating, which was a lot of fun, and how do we match people in order for them to find love. And on the creators, how do we connect users with their creators. Before that, I was at Venmo, led the data team there, Squarespace, and had a prior life as a trader in finance.
That's awesome. And I'm especially excited about, what data can do at a company like Rec Room when it's such an interesting, dynamic marketplace that you mentioned. So, a lot of people talk about wanting to have a data-driven culture. So I'm curious, as the head of data, how do you describe your own company's data culture today? And what do you think are the various aspects of having a data-driven culture for a company?
Yeah, I think every industry is different. This is my first time working at specifically at a gaming company, and knowing the historical, like the gaming culture, was important in order to get experimentation to work here. So, um, in the past, games were built on a cartridge. You would spend years perfecting them. Once they were launched, you could never touch them again. And the strength of the game was really directly related to the strength of the creative team, development team, etc. User research, CI, they played some role. You would maybe test it sometime in the middle with like a focus group, but really data didn't play a role, and data didn't need to play a role because there wasn't that kind of real-time feedback. As obviously games have evolved and platforms have emerged, things are different now because we have more of this continuous shipping model. So that's where it's a little background about gaming. Now, why this is important? Well, the founders of Rec Room were game developers, and they had a really extensive game development experience. So they came in, there were 6 founders, and all the 6 founders are still here, and really started similarly with this game building culture. And I think that's also why Rec Room was so successful right from the get-go, is that these people had a great vision, they built a really great game, and they are able to get it out to people. But there was still like data didn't play a major role there. So I think this is like best portrayed in how the company's principles evolved over the years. So first, the company's principles were ready, fire, aim. Let's, instead of ready, aim, fire, ready, fire, aim. Let's spend some time. Let's think about the right thing to build, but let's not overcomplicate it. Let's not argue for weeks or have to suffer from analysis paralysis. Let's just get things out there. We're still a young company. We don't quite know what people want. Let's go and start moving the product. As they started learning what people wanted, they added another principle: ready, fire, aim, repeat. Trying to encourage that we still want to have this culture of creative driven. We don't want to be stuck in some analysis paralysis, but once we've got something good, let's make sure to continue to repeat on and iterate on what we're doing. And then finally, what the company's come out with just over the last couple of weeks is a new principle: iteration is quality. We've gotten to the point that we have a lot of really good products throughout the platform. And rather than committing to building more good products, let's really invest in optimizing and improving on what we have. And I think this last piece, this cultural change, was really driven over the last year and a half through kind of the change in experimentation culture at Rec Room. So when you talk about the data-driven culture, I think there's kind of a few components. There's certainly this experimentation component, which is really important. I think that the company's done really well with in terms of adopting. And I think there's another component, which is the data-driven strategy component. This is awesome. Like, we've now run all these experiments. How do we make sense of these 50 experiments that we've run? What does that imply about our strategy? How can we better understand our users? And what should that imply about our roadmap over the next couple of quarters? And there, we've made some progress as well, but are still developing.
That's super fascinating. I especially love the ready, fire, aim, repeat. I think that's a nice way to say, build, measure, learn, iterate in a different mental model. So I'm curious to know, you spoke about a bit about the historic context of the gaming industry and how data is playing a role at Rec Room today. So what kind of metrics are really key to a company like Rec Room, and I guess gaming companies in general? Can you talk a bit about your framework on defining good metrics?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, for gaming, so we think of, because we're a platform, we have a lot of metrics that you might expect from similar platforms. I often think about also Rec Room as like a social network, and you've got your friends, and you want to go hang out. You come to Rec Room not just to play the games, but also to spend time with your friends. As a result, we break our metrics out into a couple different ones. I would say our top line metrics are probably just time spent. We want people to engage with the platform. We think the amount of time you spend in the platform is a measure. It's not the only measure, but a measure of how valuable you think the platform is. So that's an important metric for us. Of course, DAU, how many people are playing it on a daily basis. We think socializing and playing games is a daily habit, so we want to focus there. Retention, can we keep the people that we bring in? And of course, revenue. Revenue is purposely last because right now we still just want to build the best game possible. We were fortunate, and we raised a funding round that really gave us the flexibility to spend the time on building the best game possible rather than optimizing for revenue. So as a result, like most of our metrics that we talk about will be on kind of deeper engagement. So those are our top line metrics, and of course we've got like slightly deeper metrics like games played, bounce rate. We don't want people coming in and out. We've got reports, and there's toxicity. There's some really nasty people on the platform, and there's also this people who, I don't know, are jokesters on the platform and who can create still a negative environment. So we also want to be mindful there. When we think about
yeah, do you think are there any situations where you got to make trade-offs? Like you mentioned a lot of different metrics there, and also just these nuances of the jokesters, or like the other dangers of maybe having an online platform. So as you think about these metrics, have you ever had to make trade-offs?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest trade-off we usually might have to make is with revenue. So, hey, we've just launched a new product. It encourages. So we ran an experiment where we gave people more tokens. So the way we monetize within Rec Room is Rec Room is free. You come in and you play any of these games. And all the games that creators play are free. But the way creators make money is, the way we make money is through purchasing items within the platform. And people love to purchase new avatar items, a new sword, a new shirt, dress, clothing, etc. And within the games, maybe a new gun that you'll purchase. So typically what you'll do is you'll buy tokens, and you have these tokens that you can spend within the game. So maybe we'll run an experiment, and we have run experiments where we give people more tokens just for free. Hey, you've just completed a game. For some people, let's give them more tokens and see what happens. So in those types of situations where, hey, we're giving people something, we're seeing them spend more time in the game, we might be taking a hit on revenue. Those are kind of the trade-offs that we still are willing to take. What we do is we typically have guardrail metrics that, hey, we don't want to regress revenue too much. Or with our toxicity work, we want to make sure to keep bad people off the platform, but we don't want to hurt time spent too much. So that's also how we think about, we use that we use that guardrail framework as well.
Nice. I mean, wow, that sounds super complex as well to grapple with some of these trade-offs. But I want to pivot our conversation to just the experimentation velocity at Rec Room. When you joined, I know you said that you were at near zero experiments, and to go from there to having this culture of rapid iteration and running so many experiments and tracking all these metrics, making these trade-offs. I think it's especially hard to go from 0 to 1, right? So curious to know, what did the initial days of experimentation look like when you were just getting started? Maybe touch upon what was the view of the leadership on experimentation, and maybe any interesting anecdotes from those early days.
Yeah. So I'll kind of give an answer for what it was like for me, and maybe I'll try to generalize it for advice for other folks. But when I was looking for companies to join, I really wanted to join a company where management and the leadership team felt that they wanted to invest in data. And speaking to various companies, and then I spoke to Rec Room, it was clear that, oh wow, across the board, the leadership team wants to invest in data. They don't quite know how. I was the first data hire here, but they wanted to invest. So when I came, there was kind of like a high trust, high autonomy is what we call it here. Belief that, hey, Joel's going to come in, he's going to do what's best. We'll let him do his thing. We'll see what works. So I did kind of benefit from a little bit of this high autonomy. Still skepticism. We don't quite know what experimentation will do or all these new tools he's bringing in, but let's see what happens. So then what happened was they were open to pushing experimentation, but still I needed some support, and we needed to somehow get this embedded. And I found an engineer within the company, Brennan, and he was also very passionate about experimentation, and he helped implement StatSig for us. Once we had that implemented, we had to find an experiment, and we got a new product we were just about to launch. It was the player profile within a Rec Room. You come in and you see you see another player, and you click on their profile, and you can see their stats about themselves. And beforehand, this profile was designed 6 years ago. The colors were bright. I have a post on LinkedIn where I show this if you want to look, but boy, you would never think this is a modern designed profile. big buttons everywhere, and they redesigned it with a really sleek UI. This thing was beautiful. It looked really nice. Like you felt like there was a lot of attention played here. But we got this thing wrapped in an A/B test just from like an engineer IC went into this, and we tested this, and what we found was a lot of our metrics just tanked. Immediately, we saw a drop in friending, we saw a drop in messages, we saw a drop in retention and time spent on the platform. Like some of our top line metrics were quite negative. And when we dug into it, we saw and said, wow, in this old profile, we had a messaging button that was front and center. It was pink. It was just again, you weren't like happy looking at this thing, but it got the job done and got you to connect with people. And when we moved it, we blended it into the background, we put it in the top right, and it was a little bit harder to find. People were messaging less, they were friending less, and because of all this, they were coming back to the platform less. So we then went and iterated, and we maybe changed the color. You saw like a step change, but still we were negative time spent, negative messages, negative friending. Finally, they moved this button to the front and center, still kind of more in this beautiful UI. And we saw the metric go above neutral, plus 20%, and everybody celebrated and was happy. So we had a couple of examples like this where we had expectations for what this would do. User research and testing showed that people liked it. Internal reviews showed that people liked it, but when you got it out to players, like wow, they liked it, I suppose, but they weren't able to do the actions that they could, which resulted in all these like negative downstream effects. Another example was we launched a change in the way you control Rec Room. So you're playing around, you move right and left, you jump, whatever, and we changed some of those controls. We made it a little bit harder to friend somebody, really party up, but it's more or less the equivalent. And again, we launched this thing, we saw, wow, a drop in retention. That's because fewer people were friending, fewer people were, as a result of fewer friending, you weren't playing as much and you were churning on the platform. We fixed that and we launched it again. And then the third time, we redesigned the kind of the main screen where you can navigate to games, because we wanted to show what was across all of Rec Room. Not only do we have games, we've got clubs and events, and we've got items to buy. And we launched this thing, and again, some of our metrics tanked, and that's because we were pushing people towards areas that we thought they would like, but what they actually didn't really like. So I think what we found is there was enough signal early on that, hey, like we have clearly some good intuition. The game is growing, the game is popular, there's people are engaged, we have good like reviews, but there are some areas that are so nuanced that we could benefit from running these as an A/B test, and that I think really started the like kind of snowball effect.
Wow, those are some fascinating examples. And I especially love the situations where, we think, oh, this UI looks super sleek, and, everyone's high-fiving each other in the review, and we think that it's going to, positively impact core metrics. And then we unexpectedly see a regression, which also just comes, I think it really reiterates the importance of like gradually rolling these out and tracking the impact of these new releases on your core metrics, so you're not inadvertently tanking what matters most, which is those core metrics. And also follow up to what you just said about those examples. How did you guys think about whether you wanted to build a platform, I guess, to like run these experiments at scale versus like buying a third party service? Was there any discussions with leadership on doing the in-house versus buying?
Yeah, and this, engineers love to build things. And I was in some ways fortunate, in many ways fortunate, that we did have an experimentation that was platform that was built in-house, but it wasn't really heavily invested in. So I did have to make some arguments, but not a tremendous number of arguments to overcome it. I think sometimes data folks themselves are overly optimistic about how well they can build their own A/B test platform, and you just don't realize like how complex this thing is, and also how much like opportunity we're losing. I think what really stuck out and what convinced them was we had run A/B tests before I joined, but none of the what you would do is we would mod, some people get A and some people get B, and then we would analyze the results in Amplitude, but the results were so confusing, and analyzing A/B tests in Amplitude, if not done in absolutely the right perfect way, would just give you really incorrect results. And I think people were just seeing that we're trying with our homegrown tools with our other vendors we're using at the time, and it's just not working. Let's try it out. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Did you have to convince leadership though about the, what would be the ROI for experimentation? And especially like, and a part two for that is, now that you're running so many experiments and seeing good results, is it now easier to like justify the ROI? And is things like standardization and those kinds of challenges becoming more important now compared to the early days?
Yeah, I think we've got, like, certainly the company believes there's a lot of value in experimentation. I think, I maybe going back to like advice to other folks who don't have this exact situation. It's really, I think, starting small and identifying like really small tests to run, even though there may not be the most valuable. I think what you'll come out is you come up with some learnings, and there'll be something that's surprising and something that'll encourage the company to focus slightly different from where they had been focusing before. And then once you start doing more and more of these management and leadership, they love this because they have a strong vision, but they also want to be, validate that their vision is correct. So I think leaning into this more and more, and just starting with the small ones and making them and kind of increase in size, eventually convinces them. So we're at the point now where we've seen all of the benefits that we can have, and how much our intuition has been right and how much our intuition has been wrong, and how much it's shaped our strategy, that we know the ROI is high. Putting a number to it is still fairly challenging. But something we do is we think, well, like, let's say, how much DAO did we increase, or time spent, and how do we value time spent in DAO? How much marketing might I spend in order to get this type of DAO? And those are some of the ways we think about the ROI of experimentation.
Nice. And no, it sounds like an amazing journey, like to go from, where you were 2 years ago to now. And I guess the nature of challenges also changes. I really enjoyed you sharing some of those examples earlier. So wondering if you have any more, types of experiments you run, or, any more anecdotes or examples that you can share to our audience?
Yeah. Well, I think there's probably a few classes of experiments that I'll try to avoid, like, I'll kind of give the best description possible for those who haven't played Rec Room, which I imagine is a lot of people here. But there's like, maybe you've got the standard A/B test where you're just changing like a button color, or maybe the player profile, or something just specific to the user. Then we have A/B tests maybe that run on different games. Like if you go into one game, this game benefits from something, let's say faster processing versus this game. So now you want to understand the effect there. We might have like entry point tests where, hey, what's the value of this content? Maybe we'll hide like the ability to even see this content, just to see if we like, there's kind of a lot of those. So maybe I'll go through a couple. I think maybe start with a simple one. I like this example because it's, even I told the engineer, I wasn't sure. He really wanted to follow our new experimentation culture. So he said, hey, what I'm doing is I'm changing the height of our users by 0.1, I guess 10%. So we're going to make them slightly shorter. Should I run this as an A/B test? And honestly, I remember thinking, I probably should say yes, because we want to build this culture. There's no chance we're going to learn anything from moving the height down by 10%. And it turns out I was very wrong. One of the things that we do with StatsEgg and also internally is we send all of our events into this experimentation platform, and then we can see the movements on these events. And what we found is, for the most part, everything was neutral, except for one metric, which was gift box opens. So what happens is, when you like level up, you get a gift box, and you go and you open up your gift box, and inside is a present. And we saw that like the number of gift box opens really changed. And that's because when you lowered the height by 10%, it was way harder to open up this gift box and see what's inside. And as a result, we didn't end up shipping this change. But it was an example of like these tiny little changes that you would never expect to lead to any type of effect, actually having an effect. There was another case where we changed the way we render content within the game. And because we sent every single one of our events into StatsEgg, we saw, like, we knew something was wrong, but we didn't know what. And we found that, hey, there's this one game it was like games with cars like really went down, and wow, it turns out the render was really bad at the cars, and that's just kind of helped us debug the situation right away. So those are like kind of like small little changes that like looking at all of our events is it's kind of just showed the importance of like looking at everything. I think some
Wow.
in, yeah.
Yeah, go on, go on.
Let's see. An interesting one was this was so the question is you've got a lot of parts on your platform that you want to invest in, and should you invest in it? So within Rec Room, we have matchmaking. The way matchmaking works is let's say you want to play a game and 10 people can fit in the game, but you want 100 people are trying to get into the game. So what do? Well, you break it up into 10 different games and then you put the 10 people in it. But how do you think about which of these 10 people should go into which game? So should we even invest in matchmaking from like an engineering and a data perspective? So what you would typically do is you say, hey, you know what? Let's just there's an existing matchmaking algorithm that people have tweaked over the years. Let's just randomize it. Let's make sure that let's make it as bad as it can be, and then let's go and evaluate it. And if the existing matchmaking algorithm is better than the random, then we can actually say that, oh, okay, there's like some value there. If it doesn't, if none of the metrics end up moving, then perhaps we say we won't invest. And so we ran this test where we randomized matchmaking. Some people were just put together with random people, and others were put together with our kind of our standard approach. And we saw something very counterintuitive. And we saw the group with random matchmaking increased time spent, our top line metric by like pretty substantially. It was one of like our bigger changes from the random group. And so digging into it, we understood that, wow, we actually have a bug on the platform, or an issue with the platform when in certain conditions where there's so many people in the room, it actually results in more crashes. When there's more crashes, people like quit. And by randomizing, we got rid of this effect and we ended up boosting time spent. Now that we understand, we're starting to iterate and improve upon matchmaking, but this at least showed us that, okay, matchmaking is a lever that we want to, that we can move and continue to invest in. Maybe another interesting one is, maybe this, I'll do one more, is toxicity intervention. So we have some people who say some very nasty things on the platform. The question is, what should you do with them? People say things on the platform, we have an AI model, we have an ML model that listens to what they say, and then it ends up acting on them. If they say something bad with a high level of if we like believe this really is bad, we intervene. Now the question is, what should intervention be? Should we mute them? If we mute them, for how long should we mute them? Like 1 minute, 30 minutes, an hour, 24 hours? Should we kick them back to like their dorm? I mentioned everybody has their dorm. So hey, you can play, you can leave your dorm. Should we just ban you from the platform entirely, never let you come back? So how do we think about the severity of the interventions? So we ran experiments where we gave different interventions to different people, and we measured the impact on the number of violations that were heard by people. You say a bad word, how many people heard you?
Yeah.
Based on these different interventions. Obviously, the bans, when you kick people off the platform, had the biggest decrease in kind of toxicity heard, but it also had the biggest decrease in time spent. And then as you go down, like the 1 minute mute had the smallest impact, but on toxicity, but also the smallest effect time spent, but also the smallest effect on toxicity. So using these different interventions, we plotted a chart of like the strength of the intervention versus the decline in toxicity versus decline in time spent, and we're able to pick the right intervention. And now that's kind of what we use, and we're kind of fine tuning there. So that was a particularly interesting one because it helped us quantify something that seems like more of like a policy decision, like what should you do if people do bad things, and let us translate it into a data decision, which kind of unblocked a lot of things.
Nice. Those are such fascinating examples. And I think everyone listening in, we probably have such a strong appreciation for the complexity of this kind of work and the kind of trade-offs and, the unknowns before when you're trying to like launch something new. And also just the surprises that you have sometimes when you, try out a new idea and then learn that, oh, our thought process was, our hypothesis was not was not correct, and we and then you're able to debug and investigate what's going on. I
Yeah.
think it's like really awesome stuff. I think all your examples really like, totally resonated with me, and I'm sure I speak for everyone in saying that this is the kind of rigor in experimentation that most organizations strive for. So on that
Yeah.
note, I'm wondering if there's any generalizable one or two key tips that you can share for organizations looking to build this kind of velocity with experimentation, especially for those who are still maybe newer or still in their early days of maybe where you guys were a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. Obviously, we talked a little about the leadership buy-in and trying to get that as much as possible. Once you have that, like especially the CPO or the CEO, like it makes things a little bit easier when people push back. I don't know if I want to do this A/B test, and you at least have somebody to support you. If not, or they're ambivalent, making it as easy as possible. We used to say, Brennan, I once asked, I didn't know, I don't think he knew what I was going to use this for. I said, hey, how long does it take to wrap a feature in an A/B test? And he said, maybe about 30 minutes. And then I would go around to people and say, hey, Brennan says it takes 30 minutes to turn this into an A/B test. Let's do it. And that's kind of like got them out of the mode of, oh, this is like a whole day of work. And actually, this is pretty easy. I think there's also some process things that you could do in order to just to get people excited. People love learning about the experiment results because you're studying humans. Like you just gave a human something and you get to see what they do, and it's often very counterintuitive to what you think they would do. So what we did is we launched something called an experiment review. This is open to everybody in the company, especially like product lead, CEO, like management. They were really expected to come, but it's open to everybody in the company. And it's a once a week thing where anybody in the company who's running an A/B test and they're ready to make a decision brings it there for discussion, for their launch recommendation, and then we go ahead and move it forward. So what this did is get people like first kind of shares the knowledge around so that everybody understands what we're like gaining from this A/B test. It also gets people aware that, oh wow, this is actually proving to be valuable. Look at this was negative, it's going to be positive now. I think there's like some metrics that I don't forget, 10% or only 20% of A/B tests succeed at like really advanced companies. So you will see failures, and the nice thing about failures is that leadership and like they love seeing that, because that means that, hey, yeah, it wasn't a positive, but boy, did we just prevent a regression to our top line metrics, which is one of the things that they're really afraid of. So getting them excited, not just about the positives, but also about the negatives. And I think you do that through these experiment reviews has been, I think, a good lever that we've used.
Yeah, no, I think those experiment readouts can be a game changer. And, thanks for touching on, the culture, the importance of that process and standardization as well. And I think these are like amazing takeaways that hopefully some of our audience can, take back and evangelize in their organizations. And so we have about 10 to 12 minutes left in our chat today. And I do have like tons of things that I'd love to ask you, but maybe I'm going to just ask you like one final question before, I take a couple of questions from the audience. I already see a few questions that we have, so I want to see if we can get to as many of those as we can. But I guess my final question to wrap up is, you've worked at several well-known PLG companies and accumulated nearly 15 years of experience in this field. So I'm just curious to know, how has experimentation evolved over these years, and what initially drew you to this world of data and continues to energize you about the work that you're engaged with today?
Yeah, let's see. I think there's what drove me to the world of data, and then what kept me in the world of data. I think what drove me into the world of data, I was a trader trading exotic options. I didn't really like it. My boss went to prison. It was a whole thing. But I wanted to do something with math, and like the only thing to do with math at the time was something related to, it wasn't even called data science back then, but something in that field. And I went there just because that's kind of the best like use of my skills. And I think what's kept me in data for the last 15 years is I think the best data scientists, probably just best data practitioners, are the ones who who are curious about human nature, because that's really, I think, what data science and just data practice is just trying to understand humans, figure out what they want, prove out that that's actually like how the world works, and then give them more of the thing that they want. We always say, like, maybe the best way to develop products is figure out what people are doing despite how hard it is to do, and then just let them let them do that a lot easier. And that's like kind of like a nice hack to like identifying impact. I think experimentation has changed significantly. I started off at Squarespace where, we did marketing like A/B testing back then. I think they're more advanced now, but we would optimize. Like, you would land on Squarespace and you could click sign up a trial. And I remember once we just did a button color experiment where we changed the button from white to black against a white background, and we saw a 30% increase in button clicks. And that was like, that was like a big realization for us about how important it is to optimize this kind of top of funnel view. But I think what's happened over the last 10 or 15 years, I think the large tech companies have invested really heavily in experimentation and have done a really great job optimizing and growth hacking their product. And now, as folks are leaving those companies and going to smaller startups or companies that weren't these like the biggest tech companies, they're bringing a lot of this experimentation knowledge and practice with them. For example, myself as a practitioner, when I was head up the data team at Venmo, very, very few A/B tests. We launched the Venmo card and we A/B tested the packaging, because there's one packaging that was $10, another packaging that was 50 cents, and we wanted to see if the $10 packaging had a high ROI. But really, like the A/B testing kind of culture was limited. But now, coming out of the tech companies, large tech companies, it's much easier for me to evangelize it out. So I think we'll just continue to see experimentation culture permeating across all types of companies at all different sizes.
Thanks for sharing that. Like, that's super insightful. And I know it's been a packed conversation, and I wish we had the time to for me to go over another 5 or 6 questions from my end. But I want to spend the final 7 or 8 minutes just taking a few questions from the audience. And I think this one from Kevin could be something that you could speak to, given your visibility into both the data science and engineering side of things. And Kevin asks if you can comment on how much of your team's effort is spent on uncovering insights through A/B testing versus uncovering insights through investigatory data science on existing data. And also asks if any A/B test efforts interact, if at all, with other data science efforts on your team.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think the state we want to be in is, I think we'll never get to a 0% A/B test analysis world, but we want to get, because I think it can get fairly complex, but we certainly want to start minimizing that percentage. I think like our philosophy, or what I've been trying to tell the designers and devs on the team, is that we want to be at a place where actually you run an A/B test yourself. You don't even need a data scientist. Come bring it to experiment review. Kind of everybody will discuss and move on. But for now, until we've built out that culture, which we're building out, it doesn't. And we still kind of play a decent amount of time there. I think it depends on the team. There are some teams that don't run a lot of A/B tests, and they don't run a lot of A/B tests because it's more challenging. For example, for our creators, we have way fewer creators than we do players. And the creator community is very tight knit. And often when creators build, they build together in the same game. So kind of thinking through A/B test strategy is a lot harder for them. They spend a lot of time trying to uncover deeper insights through how people are engaging within the platform in order to shape this UGC, user-generated content, their strategy. On the player side, there are teams that we have one team that pumped out 30 experiments in 3 months with 5 engineers. And there we did spend quite a bit of time on experimentation. So I would probably say 60% experimentation, maybe 30% deeper analysis, and 10% kind of ad hoc. But we certainly want that to change. At Rec Room, we kind of emphasize the impact for the data scientist work. What work did you do that kind of uniquely drove impact for the company? I think the best way to do that is through these deep insights, through investigatory data science. But you also need to balance the kind of what the existing team could do on its own without you.
Yeah, no, that's super insightful. Another question I have from Gautam Suresh is, are there any significant network effects in user level A/B experiments, since there can be overlap in friend groups?
Yeah, I think like in particular, maybe the matchmaking one was one which had like could suffer from a lot of network effects. Maybe like you and your friends all want to join one room and all that. So what we actually did, this was outside of StatSync, though I think StatSync now is able to do this. We ran something called the switchback experiment. And the idea of the switchback experiment is that every amount of time, in this case, was every hour you switch to a different algorithm across the board. So that way, if something is really bad in one game and you go like what might happen is you have an algorithm that's actually really good and makes you spend more time in one game, but actually made you spend less time in the next game and maybe less time overall. So a pure room level A/B test would actually show, oh, hey, we're actually increasing time, but really you're decreasing time because maybe you're cannibalizing time for the future. So we run switchback tests, which every hour or every certain amount of time, just change the algorithm. And that way you can actually understand the whole effect across the entire hour across all the different rooms, which lets us measure some of that like maybe interaction effect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. And I've also just dropped a blog on our chat, a recently published blog from one of our data scientists, Maggie, who spoke about switchback tests. So hopefully that can be like a good follow-up read for anyone interested. Maybe one final question. Like, I know we have a bunch of questions, so unfortunately we can't get to everything in this session. But I think a good final question to wrap things up is from Colin, who asks, who talks about, we often want to reiterate, we want to iterate and see results quickly from A/B tests and short-term metrics changing, like DAO, retention, over the life of the experiments. He asks if you ever had to revisit changes or look at what impacts things have in the long term, and if there are situations when things might be initially good, but over time had a became bad on a different metric.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. We do this in a few different ways. First, some teams, when they're like the more advanced teams within Rec Room, they run long-term holdouts. So maybe 3 or 6 months where all of the experiments that they launch, that they've run and tested and they launch, they throw into this holdout. And then at the end of the 3 or 6 months, you look back and say, hey, what was the cumulative effect of everything? This serves two purposes. It might be that two experiments you've run looked really good, but actually combined, the effects aren't additive. So let's like really understand what that is. And B, hey, the effects might turn negative over time. So this lets us do that. Two, there are experiments that we've run that we just don't quite feel comfortable with the results, where we do just we leave 5% of them out. What was an example where we were demoting? So there's some games on Rec Room that crash a lot. So we thought, you know what, we're going to demote some of these games and to try to reduce crashes. And we demoted the games and we reduced crashes. So we thought, okay, well, let's launch this. But then we thought, well, maybe this is just a short-term game where we're reducing crashes, but actually these are really good games, and if we keep them away from players, they're going to churn. So we launched this with a 5% holdout, and we actually found this was a good thing, and it had like cumulative effects over time. Maybe the last one is we ran an experiment where we badged someone. We said, hey, like you can now send messages through this. And we saw a major increase in messages, and the team was celebrating, like, wow, look at like plus 50% message gains. But actually, if you looked at it in a different way, you saw that it was plus 50% message gains on day one when the notification launched, but plus 0% days 2 through. So that kind of taught us, all right, do we actually want to be launching things that have such a short-term effect and don't actually benefit like users in the long run? And I believe we didn't actually end up launching that one.
Yeah, I guess there's always those novelty effects where users want to try something new when you give them a notification.
Exactly.
But it's kind of always that challenge between short-term wins and like long-term, learnings and metric impact. But thank you so much for everyone who asked those questions. I tried to answer a few more on the chat. But if unfortunately we may have missed one or two because we are squeezed for time. But I can only imagine how insightful it must be to sit in on one of your, weekly experiment readouts and the kind of
Oh
insights
yeah.
that people bring in.
If you do find it exciting, come join Rec Room. We are hiring across a lot of different roles, and we'd love to have you.
Yeah, no, it must be super fascinating to just learn so much about your millions of users in real time and learn from that and like build amazing products. So no, I truly enjoyed all the examples and anecdotes that you had to share, and I wish we could just go on for another 45 minutes. But I really appreciate you taking the time to do this today, Joel. I hope I know you need to catch your breath. You've said so many amazing things over the last 45 minutes. And I hope you found this conversation engaging as well. Any parting thoughts before we conclude the session?
Yeah, first, yeah, thank you all so much for participating. It also, sometimes it can be really challenging to change the culture of a company, especially when maybe this is not something they've done before. What I found is that leadership, they want the company to succeed, and they're open to it. They just need the right argument. So sometimes for data folks, it's hard, but just push it through, and there will be a lot of rewards for you and the company by doing so. But fight the good fight.
Nice. No, that it's been quite the journey, I know, for you. And I'm so glad that we get to work with you at StatSig. And thank you so much, Joel, for joining us today. Thank you everyone for taking time on a Thursday to join us for this virtual event. Hopefully we do more of these in the months to come. Hopefully we see you again, Joel, and we can continue this conversation. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and bye for now.